Chapter 18. A morning. ING. My phone was bleeping insistently and I was just as insistently ignoring it. Eventually, Darian untangled himself and went to retrieve it. I'm starting to think you got a secret lover, babes. He tossed my phone to me. I had accrued an extensive collection of emails and text messages. Oh fuck. Oh, wanking fuck. I'm meant to be in Cambridge. There's a wedding tomorrow and a rehearsal dinner tonight. I rolled myself into sheets that smelled of both of us, pulled a pillow over my head, and winged, in a rather muffled manner about not wanting to go. Unlike most of my social engagements, I hadn't made my usual internal commitment to avoid Max and Amy's wedding. There were some acts too low even for me. But somehow the reality of it had slipped away from me, along with everything but Darian, and I was left without resources. Darian sat down on the edge of the bed and patted lightly at my shoulder. Better get moving, babes. I don't want to. I feel panicky just thinking about it. It'll be awful. What if something goes wrong? He tugged at my cocoon. It's just you being anxious or whatever. It's gonna be fine. Just anxious, I repeated, as furiously as I could from beneath the pillow. Just anxious. Fuck you. That's like saying, it's just a broken leg, start climbing that mountain. Sorry, he said with a distinct lack of repentance. I just don't think you should miss some in what's important to your mates. I've spent the last however many years letting my friends down. Believe me, they'll cope. AUDIOBOOK, that's sad, I snarled at him. Sorry, a pause, and then, you haven't let me down, babes. Give me time. He slowly began to peel away my sheets, and I slowly stopped fighting him. But you did maudlin and everything. He pulled off the pillow and put it back in its usual place. What do you normally do when you have to do something what you feel all anxious about? I don't do it. That ain't true. I sat up, sighing. It's mostly true. I suppose I could take some diazepam, but I hate it. It makes me feel subhuman. I think Hamlet must have been on it. Don't think they had that back in I Story, babes. 666 that this too solid flesh would melt. It's exactly like that. And it's addictive. So if I'm not careful, I'll end up clinically anxious, bipolar depressive with a drug problem. I waved a finger at him. Oh, and let's not forget its many side effects. One of which is depression. He made a snuffling sound and hastily clapped a hand over his mouth. It's fine, laugh it up. It's funny, it's fucking ridiculous, but there ain't nothing else. Yes, Darian, I said with sharp-edged patience. I really want to medicate my medication with medication, suppose not, he said. I remember thinking you had a lot of pills first time I stayed over. I gaped at him. Wait, you knew all along. I knew you had something going on, but I wouldn't pry, babes. I thought you'd tell me when you wanted, and you still slept with me. Wanted to be with me, he shrugged. Course, you're a strange man. Darian Taylor, takes one to know one, babes. He made me smile. Just a little. And, in return, what could I give except ugly truths? I don't want to take more pills than I have to. It's taken years to get this close to stable, and, for the most part, it worked. Yes. Depression dogged my footsteps and the promise of hypomania glittered sometimes on the horizon, but I hadn't been manic for a long time. I didn't know whether it was the ECT, the medication, the counseling, or the very fact of being appropriately diagnosed, but it wasn't something I dared to case shine, in case I broke the spell. I wouldn't have called myself a superstitious man, but when it came to the intricacies of my biochemistry, the complexities of my illness, I was as helpless as a frightened child who prayed to a god called science. They've tried to fix the anxiety, I said, but if you take this, you have to take that, or stop taking the other, and the whole bloody awful cycle begins again. They did find something that helped a bit. But I stopped taking it. Yeah. Yes? The side effects. I got fat. Okay. And I know it's shallow. I know it's irresponsible. Niall's told me 1,000 times. But, honestly, I'd rather be anxious than fat. I'm with you, babes. Darian sounded suddenly about as serious as I'd ever heard him. Also, right, if you think about it, it's stupid to have medication what's supposed to be for stopping people being depressed what also makes them fat. Cost that'd be well depressing. I shook my head. What manner of idiocy would lead someone to put their vanity above their mental health? And what manner of idiot would support such a choice? But I couldn't help liking that he did. Accidental or not, it was the first flicker of understanding I'd ever received that I had the same right to be just as shallow and stupid as everyone else. That I did not have to be grateful to simply roll from day to day as a bloated, mindless zombie. Then, I said, we're both shallow and deserve each other. Nah, it's not about what you look like, it's about being happy with how you look. And if you ain't happy, then you ain't gonna look good whatever deep. He gave me a look I couldn't quite read, frowning a little. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. I was a bit of a chubber when I was growing up. What with being gay as well, it wasn't a major laugh. Truthfully, I couldn't imagine him as ever being less than beautiful. And don't think, he added, in a more playful tone, this means I'm gonna let you get away with not going to your mate's thing. I gave a hollow groan. But I could be consoling you for your minor childhood wounds. Healing you with my sweet loving. Shut up. And stop stalling. 'Cause getting married is important. Is there any way I could convince you it's an outdated, heteronormative construct that has no place in a secular society? I think it's totes romantic. Oh, dear God. I dived back under the covers. Come on, babes, he said, tugging on a toe I'd accidentally left out in the cold. It'll be a white. Want me to go with you or summon? I stuck my head out. Would you? Course. I love weddings. Me. I'd get to eat cake and meet all your mates. Oh, fuck. I hadn't thought of that. Spending hours, and days, fucking and laughing with Darian in the privacy of my own home was one thing. Introducing him to all my Oxbridge friends as my, boyfriend, was quite another. Nobody would understand. And I couldn't blame them, I hardly understood myself. People would smile, of course, but I would see the question behind the smile. Has Ash finally completely lost it? Has his self-esteem plummeted to such depths that he's trawling Essex for toddy? And, anyway, surely it wouldn't be fair on Darian, having him stand around, being charmingly bewildered, while everyone talked over his head and laughed and speculated behind his back. Laughed and speculated behind my back. Actually, I said hastily, it probably wouldn't work out. You know what weddings are like. This has been meticulously planned for the last 12 centuries. Wars have been fought. If I showed up with an unplanned guest, I think it might cause the end of the world. It'll be fine, babes. I bet you anything there's like a dead uncle or somebody without their partner or summon. I don't think we should risk it. Well, call and ask. And if they're like no, I can send you off with good thoughts and good vibes and everything and go back home for a bit. 'Cause my nan probably thinks you've got me tied up in the basement or summon. Note to self, move house, get basement. He laughed. You don't have to tie me up, babes. I'm like a volunteer, but if I had a basement, you'd look good tied up in it. You say the sweetest things. Now get on with ringing your mate. I had been so distracted by the basement that I couldn't think of a single plausible excuse for why I didn't want him to come with me to the wedding. The truth, I don't want my friends to think less of me than they do already, which they inevitably would if they saw me with you, would have done the trick, of course. But came with the unfortunate side effect that I probably wouldn't be tying Darian to anything ever. I hadn't entirely been lying about the wedding being an event from hell, so calling Amy seemed like it might be a sensible gamble. She would probably tell me that it wasn't possible to accommodate a random gentleman she'd never met before on the happiest day of her life, which would liberate me to go back to bed with the random gentleman in question. Amy picked up after a couple of rings, greeting me with a slightly wary edge to her voice I'd never heard before. I put it down to general wedding-related stress. Yes. Hi, Amy. I kind of wanted to. The thing is, my flow of awkward was interrupted by the buzz of voices over the line, and I lost track of my own stammering. Amy said something I couldn't make out, and things quieted down a bit. Then she spoke into the phone again. Sorry, what was that? I tried again. I'm sort of. I know it's really short notice, but there was another interruption. Just a minute, said Amy, and for a moment I thought she meant me, but then she was back. What's the matter, Ash? Fuck. Shit. Wank. Oh, nothing's the matter. There's a guy. I know the answer is probably no, but can I bring him to God? Yes. She sounded so incredibly thrilled that it was only then that I realized she'd been expecting me to pull out. Abandon her on her wedding day. As I had wanted to do less than 5 minutes ago. And probably would have done, had it not been for Darian. There was no denying it. No hiding it. I was a terrible, terrible person. Selfish. Cowardly. Worthless. My stomach churned, as though I were trying to flinch away from myself. Are you sure? I said. I mean, what about the seating plans? Won't it throw everything off? I mean, it's okay if not at all. It's absolutely no problem. The seating plan is already buggered beyond belief, so he can come to the dinner tonight as well. One of Max's great-uncles passed away a couple of weeks ago. And Greg and Laura are getting divorced, so they both decided not to come in case they met without a lawyer present. Although since Max knows about 80 lawyers, I don't know what they were worried about. Right, I said dazedly. I can't wait to meet your man. But now I have to go before this turns into a bloodbath. See you later, and thank you, mwah, darling. Right, I said again. I looked into Darian's wide, hopeful eyes. You can come, he grinned. We are gonna give it large, babes. Oh my God, I need your help. He bounced, naked, off the bed, and started scrabbling around on the floor, emerging a few seconds later like an excitable retriever. Do you think these Orthies? The choice in question seemed to be silver sequin Ugg boots or silver sequin Converses. I honestly have no mechanism for forming an opinion, I said, after a moment. Think it better be these. He waved the Converses. Sparkle but subtle. I think Subtle has long since left the building. There was nothing for it. I had to get dressed. Thankfully it wasn't too much of a challenge, since Niall once unkindly suggested that I always looked like I was going to a wedding. Anyway. Check you, babes. Darian crept up behind me and squeezed. He was wearing a jacket that looked as though it was made from the feathers of a bird of paradise, which, I suppose, passed for formal wear in his world. Let me guess, I said. I look like I work in Parliament. Oh, my God, babes. Look at all these ties. Peering into my wardrobe, he gave a gasp and pulled out a silver twill Stefano Ricci tie, set with Swarovski crystals. I'd bought it because I was so fucking depressed I would have bought anything. Wear this one, I cringed. With a navy suit, or indeed ever, absolutely not. But it's so bling, babes. It goes with my shoes. The tie says one of two things. It either says, I'm a wanker, or I'm mentally ill, and, though I am both, I have no wish to broadcast it, somehow, between expressing my determination not to wear the tie and leaving the house. I ended up wearing the tie. Chapter 19. Afternoon. I've never been to Cambridge. Darian bounced excitedly on the balls of his feet as we dropped my bags off in the room Amy had booked for me at her old college. It's well nice, bah. It's just like a smaller version of Oxford, where they cheat at tiddlywinks and punt from the wrong end. You gonna show me Rand? No, we're going to stay here and fuck. I think we have time before dinner if we're quick about it. You're so romantic, babes. We fell onto the single bed with such abandon that it went crashing into the wall, knocking a chunk out of the plasterwork. From the arched, wisteria-woven windows came a sudden shaft of sunlight, warmed gold by the surrounding sandstone, in which the dancing dust motes glittered like stars. Evening the rehearsal dinner was being held in the 14th century old hall, though I was unsure why we needed to practice eating and having awkward conversation. Are we like having dinner in a church? Whispered Darian, awestruck. It's just a college dining hall. What's with the stained glass? Most likely an 18th or 19th century edition. He gave me a look. I just think it's proper weird. At that point, we got swept along into the rest of the milling guests, escaping only from the hurricane of introductions, greetings, handshakes, and meaningless civilities when we finally washed up in front of Max and Amy and the rest of the wedding party. Amy threw herself into my arms. Ash, you came. I'm so happy. Yes. And I brought, Darian. Amy beamed at him. Thank you for coming to the wedding of a total stranger. I hope it isn't completely awful. No way. I love a wedding. Me. I think it's proper nice, taking an oath to be with someone for your whole life. I reckon most people want to get done with me after 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? That's a blatant lie, said Amy staunchly. You're lovely. He gleamed under his tan, blushing. Oh, thanks. How nice are you? Did you come here? Like Cambridge? Yes. This is my old college. You must be well clever. I'm well good at bullshitting, she grinned. Why do you think I'm an agent? What? Like a spy? No. A literary agent. Oh, right. Haha. He shuffled his feet. Amy looked grave. Of course. I have to say that, because otherwise I'd have to kill you. Darian laughed, and a vague, unexpected warmth swept over me. Something I hadn't felt for a long time, something almost like pride, in Amy, and Darian, and a little bit for me. It seemed, just then, an impossible kindness that two such people could find something worth liking in all my sharp and scattered pieces. I turned into Darian's shoulder and smothered a smile there. One of his arms slid round me as though it was the most natural thing in the world. This place is well nice for a wedding, he nodded approvingly. Well, classy. But didn't you find it a bit like depressing when you was there, 'cause everything is so old and like? I dunno. Serious? God. Yes. We were only here because there was no fucking way I was getting married in Oxford, and Buckingham Palace wasn't available. So what can you do? He laughed. I hope you're gonna be happy, Tajiver. Amy gestured to Max, who was caught up in what looked like a tense, familial negotiation. Have you seen the guy I'm marrying? If I can't be happy with him, what chance is there? Darian followed her pointing finger. He's quality. 100%, he agreed. I know, right. I mean the Arcelone, totes. Are you two quite finished? I said. Or maybe you want to marry each other? I suppose I'll be able to bring myself to console Max. Taking one for the team, grinning, Darian snuggled me further into the crook of his arm. He's getting gel. There, Ash. Amy smirked. Your arse is quality, too. I was about to make a severe retort when Max turned around, and the whole cycle of introductions had to start again. Well, bless my heart, exclaimed another voice, as incongruous within Cambridge's oak-paneled walls as Darian's. What a perfectly charming homosexual. My mouth fell open. Beside me, Darian's did the same. Max had never told me his mother was Scarlett O'Hara. Even wearing a single string of pearls and a black dress of such breathtaking simplicity it would have made Holly Golightly seem crass. She looked as though there ought to have been at least 6 gentlemen callers dead at her feet. She must have been at least 50, but time had not dared to touch her. Max's beauty was her beauty. His bone structure a bolder, more angular version of hers. His hair, the same precise shade of impossible, gleaming gold. At her side, he was making frantic, windmilling I'm so sorry gestures with his hands. Come here, you darlin' thing, she said, crooking a finger at my date. Darian looked nervously over his shoulder, on the off chance she was referring to some other darlin' thing. And then, with the air of a man going to his execution, allowed her to claim his arm. She smiled at him like a firing squad readying arms. I have always believed a gentleman needs a lick of the devil in him. I glanced at Max's father, who was wearing a tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows and had a face like a 3-day-old tea bag. At which point, taking advantage of my split-second distraction, Max's mother stole my glitter pirate, leaving me standing there, jilted like Sue Ellen. I'm so sorry, said Max. She's actually the worst person in the world. Across the room, I caught sight of Darian, being whirled off through the guests. I think she's mental, he mouthed urgently and without subtlety. I hid a smile and went to get a drink. And another. And another. Anything to keep me afloat in this sea. Somehow I ended up on the edge of a group of people I vaguely recognized from university. The conversation: politics, literature, the state of the economy, what had happened to so and so washed over me. Bored. I was bored. Ash Winters, drawled a voice that sounded gratingly posh to my ears and yet seemed familiar. We must stop meeting like this. I gazed into a face I might once have found attractive. Brown eyes, brown hair, sharp, clever features, a thin blade of a mouth, whimsical and cruel. Quite, I said. Who the fuck was he? Hugh? He said, a smile concealing what was clearly irritation. Hugh Hastings. Nope. Not a clue. Of course, we met in Brighton. He smiled again. We went to the same college. Oh, that Hugh. Right? The one I hadn't pulled at the stag party. You know, after you left with that, he waved a hand as if Darian defied mere description. I remembered how I knew you. You did. A vague sense of unease uncoiled like a serpent. It was just anxiety. Paranoia. Relax. Breathe. Yeah, you were the one who had the complete psychotic break, right? Suddenly I was the center of a circle of curious, glistening eyes. Somebody could have mentioned Robbie Williams, but there was nothing, just a hungry silence. I felt a shamed flush sear my cheeks. My head spun. My mouth filled up with the taste of bile. Yes, I said, with broken glass calm. Yes, that was me. Oh, you're that fellow, a different voice. You poor bastard. Are you all right now? I'd had this nightmare before, but I'd always woken up. I smoothed my cuffs. Yes? Yes, I'm fine. Another voice. The same. It didn't matter. What was it like? I was still smoothing my cuffs, and even I could see how it looked. A tick turned habit turned compulsion. Stop smoothing your cuffs. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. I couldn't even look at them. What do you mean? What was it like? Did they lock you up? Was it like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? How did you get out? Breathe, Ash. Breathe. I dug a tunnel into the sewer system from beneath the poster of Rita Hayworth. There was a long silence as everyone tried to work out if the clinically insane were allowed to be sarcastic. It might have worked, too. I could have deflected them, and held them at bay instead of the other way around, but my breathing was too shallow, my voice too unsteady. It wasn't a joke anymore, it was another piece of derangement. I might as well have been standing there in white pajamas. Another myth. They let you wear whatever you want, and you still dress like crap because nobody cares and neither do you. I swallowed. I got better, so they let me out. Can they do that, Hugh? It took everything I had, but I risked a glance at him. Just then, I was not too proud to plead. Don't do this to me. He had liked me once. But his face reflected only the blank, uncomprehending confidence of the wholly unhurt, and a touch of private malice. It seemed that being slighted by a lunatic was not something easily forgiven. I thought, he said, once you were in the system, it was impossible to get out again. I read a book by this American journalist who pretended to be batshit so he could expose what it's really like for mental patients, but, of course, once he was admitted, he couldn't prove he wasn't meant to be there. Murmurs rising like the sea to engulf me. I mean, I can kind of see why. If an insane person tells you they're sane, how are you supposed to tell it's not for their evidence of their insanity? And that would be really dangerous, wouldn't it? I felt the weight of all those expectant stares. We do walk amongst you, I said, at last. Pity. I was drowning in pity, as slick as oil. I felt thick. Small and sick and utterly lost. I needed somebody to save me. But how could you be rescued from yourself? Hugh's voice pricked my skin like 1,000 tiny needles. And the orange chap in the feathers is your boyfriend now, again. That stomach-churning surge of interest from the others. I could see what they saw, the madman and his fool. And now they would have us caper. Their scrutiny had been unpleasant enough when it touched upon my past, but now their eyes were burrowing into my present. A better man would have owned his truths. But, at the moment, the vulnerability of mere madness seemed nothing to the vulnerability of showing that I cared. I managed to meet the stares and gave what I hoped was an insouciant smile. I wouldn't go that far. He's more of a fucky, really a fucky. Is that like a fuck buddy? Yes, like a fuck buddy, but without the tiresome buddy requirement. Someone chuckled. Finally, it wasn't pity. So, sort of the late night drive-through of sex. For when you get that craving for something cheap and filthy, like a Big Mac. Precisely, I said. None of the hassle of a relationship and cheaper than a whore. And, now I think about it, cheaper than a Big Mac too. I waited for the laugh that never came. Nobody was looking at me, except Hugh. He put a hand to his lips, as if to conceal whatever lay beneath it. I thought, perhaps, a smile. And then, I knew. I knew what I had done. In that endless, awful second, I would have gladly destroyed the world, myself, and everyone in it, to avoid turning round. I had plumbed the depths of my own shame and disappointment so many times it barely mattered anymore, but how could I face Darian? Knowing he had finally seen the truth of me. He was standing behind me. Of course he was. His eyes had that shiny look of someone on the brink of tears. His mouth opened and closed a few times, before he said finally, "Mate, that's bang AHT of order." His voice broke on the final word. "I thought you liked me," and then he turned and walked away. Everyone was staring at me. I should have been running after Darian, apologizing, throwing myself at his feet, even, but I was pinned by eyes, like a moth in a glass case. Besides, there was little value in the remorse of a créature like me. I was sorry, of course I was sorry, but it was the regret of the thief who gets caught, not the regret of the truly penitent. The scene was already replaying in my head, and I could not imagine a version of events in which I did not sacrifice Darian to save myself a little humiliation. I was too weak, too selfish, and I simply did not deserve to apologize to him. "Man, that was cold," whispered someone, in a voice that hovered on the brink of awe. "Ouch," said Hugh. Spite glinted in his eyes. Bit of a mismatch in expectations there. I fear I shrugged. Plenty of cocks in the sea. Anybody got a cigarette? Blindly, I took the whole packet and the box of matches from Hugh and went into the quad. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the flame to the tip of the first cigarette. But, finally, I lit up. I smoked cigarette after cigarette, littering the flagstones at my feet with fag ends and burnt-out matches, breathing smoky poison into the still night air. My eyes stung, moisture gathering at the corners. It must have been the cold. Or the cigarette ash. I don't understand. Niall stepped through the doorway. "Why would you go to all that trouble for him, and then do that?" I gave a startled, sobbing hiccup, and dropped my last cigarette. I cursed, extinguished it with my foot, and tried surreptitiously to dash away my tears with the heel of a hand. I'd meant it when I told Niall that I never wanted to see him again, but right now I couldn't find the energy to argue about it. In some strange way, it was almost nice to see him. At least I wasn't alone in the dark, with nothing but an empty packet of cigarettes. "I don't know either. You should go after him." I scraped out a mirthless laugh. "I don't know where he is, and this isn't a fucking rom-com. I'm not going to catch up with him just as he's getting onto a plane, kiss him in front of a crowd of applauding strangers, and live happily ever after. Besides, what am I going to say to him? I'm just a manic depressive standing in front of a moron, asking him to love me." "Well, no," said Niall, "but you could say you're sorry for being a prick." "Oh, fuck off, Jiminy Cricket." He sat down on the step, hands folded loosely between his knees, and, after a moment, I crumpled down next to him. This felt almost like being back at university, except for the gulf of time that stood between the 18-year-old I used to be and what was left of him. Though perhaps, for Niall, nothing had changed at all. He was still longing for Max and stuck looking after me. I thought a lot about what you said, he said finally. You were right about all of it. But I wasn't lying when I said I went out with you because I loved you. And that I still love you. It had been so long that I'd been anything but an obligation to Niall that the words sounded almost like a foreign language. And that makes everything all right, does it? It really doesn't. I'm so sorry, Ash. I lost sight of you. Not because of your illness but because of me. He stared at his interwoven fingers. The truth is, I've spent half my life loving men who didn't want me. It's stupid, but there it is. God. We really do have first world problems, don't we? Niall gave a soft sigh. Yes, we do. He unlocked his fingers and laced them with mine. It wasn't until he touched me that I realized how cold I was. Unfortunately, they still hurt. I nestled my hand into his. It felt nice. So nice that I had to say ungraciously, what did I do to deserve the pep talk? Or can't you break the habit of trying to save me? But he only smiled. I'm just pointing out that you've acted like a complete dick. Because that's what friends do. I press my free hand to my heart. Oh, stop. Before I cry, wanker, but you love me, don't push your luck. Suddenly I blurted out. I don't have his number. I don't even know where he lives. Facebook. Twitter. I realized I was digging my ragged nails into Niall's hand and forced myself to relax. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't bother to ask. And, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's over. Look, I'm not trying to be your fairy godmother, and, for the life of me I can't understand it, but it seemed to me you really liked him. I didn't like him. He just made me feel good. It wasn't real. It was a biochemical blip, Niall shrugged. When you put it like that, so is everything. That doesn't make it worthless. Or any less real. Then we're all mad here, I muttered. We must be, he said, smiling a little, or we wouldn't have come. We sat for a while in silence. A round, fat moon, jaundiced by the lights of the city, floated in an ink blue sky. We are probably missing the dinner, I said at last. It'll be fine. As long as we don't miss the real thing. I stole a glance at Niall. His face was so familiar to me that I had long since ceased to pay it any attention. Once we had been friends, once we had been lovers. And now we were just two people who knew each other too well, who had, through carelessness, not malice, hurt each other too much. Finally, I said, I know I never told you, but I did care about you. There was a pause. I mean, as much as I'm capable of it. Wow. He looked thoughtful. You are really bad at expressing your feelings. Shoo. Air. Shut up. And I swallowed. I did want you. You're, not entirely unwantable. And I'm sorry if he ever made you feel like not. Niall made such a strange noise that I thought I might have made him cry. But, no, he was laughing. And, laughing, he dragged me into a hug. What the fuck are you doing? I protested. Let me go. Eventually, he did. He shook his head. Not entirely unwantable. Be still, my beating heart. Oh, leave me alone. I stared at the flagstones between my feet. There's one more thing. My hooks are tenured. I'd always been certain this would be an admission of weakness, that it would lessen me somehow, or that it was a truth so fragile that utterance would shatter it. But the words slipped out, as they had in my whispered confession to Darian some days that felt like a lifetime ago. Effortless as honey. Thank you for, everything. And I'm glad you came back that day. They did not break. I did not break. And I felt not mortified, but free. Niall stared at me. And then began to cry. Will you stop it, you big Nancy? I patted him awkwardly between the shoulders. Typical, really, that I'd fucked and been fucked by this man 6 ways to Sunday and I didn't have a clue how to comfort him. No wonder you can't get a boyfriend. I know you won't believe me, he said, sniffling, but going out with you was okay? When we broke up, for ages afterwards, all I could think about was the bad stuff. But there was good too, wasn't there? Yes. You saved my life at least twice. Once literally I took a deep breath. You're kind of a muppet, but I meant what I said. You mean all that deeply sentimental, mushy stuff about you maybe caring about me just a little bit. Look, I need to stop having this heart-to-heart before I throw up. My heart gets claustrophobic. He smiled in such a soggy way that I felt obliged to give him my pocket square. I can't blow my nose into this. He held it up in the moonlight like it was a priceless objet d'art. I sensed he was mocking me, which was a vast improvement on crying. It feels like sacrilege. Gucci will never know. Niall snuffled into my handkerchief. And then tried to hand it back to me. You can keep it. Really well. He somehow contrived to smirk, even with a red nose and swollen eyes. Little Timmy won't starve this winter. Fuck you. I'm clinically depressed. I'm allowed to buy nice things. You mean you're a vain git with too much money? That too. There was another silence. It was oddly comfortable. I let my shoulder rest against his, just a little bit, and we leaned against each other. Eventually, he asked, "So, it's definitely a no to the Notting Hill moment." I nodded. Even putting aside what an almighty fool I look, he deserves better than me. All it needed was a crowing cock to end the scene. Niall choked. Did you just draw a direct comparison between you being a bit rude at a wedding and Peter's denial of Jesus Christ? I might have gone too far there, you think? Well, I'm an atheist. They're both just characters in a book I haven't read. Stop trying to dodge the issue. He poked me in the leg. Ash, I'm not trying to be your conscience or anything, but you can't just ditch Darian in the middle of Cambridge. I hunched over my knees. He's probably already gone. Then go check. Seriously, it's the least you can do. I can't face him. I can't. And, look, my voice rose. Can you stop fucking judging me for 5 fucking seconds? It's all you've ever done. Niall held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I just think it's a shitty thing to do to someone. No shittier than what I've already done. Actually, I think it is. And you're better than that, Ash. I know you are. I'm not. I shook my head. Maybe once, but not anymore. Deal with it or don't. But, if you're going to try to be my friend again, stop pretending I'm someone I'm not. There was a long silence. That's fucking unfair, you know. I shrugged. It's the way it is. Why are you trying to push me away? Was Darian not enough for one night? He was right. Of course. Whatever the broken things we had scattered across the years, Niall knew me. And tonight I was wielding his kindness like a blade to my skin. Sorry, I muttered. Wow. Progress. Fuck off, he laughed. So what now? I don't know. Back to the dinner, I guess. And, after the wedding, I might go home and watch Notting Hill. While crying manly tears and eating handful after handful of wasabi peas, the worst of it was, even I couldn't tell if I was joking. Want company? No, my response was instinctive. But then I thought about it. Actually? Yes? All right, he grinned. You know, you're shockingly sentimental, sometimes. I shrugged. All cynics are. Later, I stood on the mathematical bridge watching the moonlight curl over the dark waters of the Cam and tried not to think where Darian might be. Later, I walked cobbled streets, ankle-deep in shadows, trying to find the courage to return to our room. But there was only an emptiness, as unchanging as my tearless eyes. Later, I took a ludicrously expensive room in a hotel on Thompson's Lane. A lavish glass-walled box overlooking a gleaming toy city. Somewhere beneath the spires and gables, Darian Taylor was hating me. I lay, fully dressed, on top of the bed and watched broken pieces of light skittering across the ceiling. I simply couldn't face his disappointment. The damage I knew I'd done. I'd ruined Darian, just like I'd ruined Niall. It was better this way, for both of us. Darian would get on with his life, and I would drag myself through the ashes of mine. When Niall had left me, it had felt so inevitable. I can't bear it, he'd said. I can't bear you. I'd known for a long time how futile it was. He might as well have tried to love a parasite. I'd picked up the knife because I'd understood. at last, that there was no changing. No going back. And going on had seemed not only unbearable, but pointless. My whole life, an exercise in treading water simply not to drown. And yet here I was, having made the same mistake all over again. I should have learned, even if I was incapable of anything else. But Darian had slipped past me somehow, like light through fractured glass. For some bright, fleeting moments, he had made me happy, and all I had done was hurt him. Later, Cambridge drenched in a bloody dawn. My world without Darian. Sleep, of course, had proven elusive. Somehow, I had grown too accustomed to his body and the murmur of his breath. I thought about going back to the room, but it was too late, and he would not have waited. He would not have waited. Later, Darian had gone. There was nothing left in the room but my suitcase and the heavy perfume of the wisteria. I sat down on the edge of the bed, which was still rumpled from our exertions yesterday. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. But it was better this way. His last gift would not be his reproach. I could remember him laughing, sparkling, my dear, precious glitter pirate. And I could keep deluding myself that, for a little while at least, I'd been the man he believed I was, instead of the man I am. Dizzy, a little sick, I staggered to the window. Yanked up the sash. I still couldn't catch my breath. Oh God, fuck. I was going to die and, for once, I didn't want to. I was choking on fucking wisteria. I braced myself against the casement and just about managed not to have a panic attack. I kept thinking I'd get used to them someday, but no. They thundered over me like a fucking train, every fucking time. In the quadrangle below, the wedding guests wandered aimlessly back and forth. I should have been with them. From a nearby window, open like mine, drifted the opening bars of F. Ken Perfect. I put my head in my hands and felt like crying. Chapter 20. After. When Nal left, the silence of my flat felt like a funeral. I went into the kitchen to water the sole surviving plant, my attention drifting untethered between the gray-misted, gray-graveled street below and the gray stream falling from my gray tap. I closed my eyes. I was going to crash, wasn't I? And now I was drowning the sole surviving plant. I stuck it on the rack to dry out. The water droplets clinging to the leaves glittered like tears. They thudded onto the draining board, heavy as a heartbeat. It was barely evening, but I crawled into bed. Depression stupefied, weary and hopeless, I should have slept. But I was strangely restless, slightly tearful, and troubled by wayward thoughts. Depression was thoughtless, tearless, an animal's uncomprehending pain. Some hours later, I realized I wasn't depressed. I was sad. This little piece of hurt was all my own. I lay there, in the dark, rolling the idea across my mind like a pearl. Sometimes, I would wake in the middle of the night, or pause arrested in my day, because my skin would shiver with the memory of a touch. As though it wanted to tell me something. Days, the ideas unfurled across my whiteboard and, slowly at first, I wrote them down, letter by letter until I had sentences, paragraphs, chapters. Amy said it felt different from the others. More about people than puzzles. She said she liked it. And I liked writing it, my every word a piece of broken mirror, showing me a glimpse of Darian. Summer. One day, after meeting Max for coffee, I stumbled down a back alley in Soho to get away from the crowds, having formed the erroneous impression that this would constitute a shortcut rather than a descent into hell. Somewhere between the Eros movie rental, the French Pussy private dancing cafe, and a sex shop called the Wax Shack, I found myself staring at a small red door. It was edged in flaking gold and opened onto a narrow staircase leading who knew where. The reason I'd stopped at all was because the sign above the door read Alice in England. I was not in the habit of wandering, at random, into mysterious buildings in Soho, and years spent trying to rationalize the ever-spinning fairground ride of my depression had left me with a deep wariness of impulsive behavior. Impetuous to insane was too narrow a line, too easy a step. My first thought, as I hesitated curious and curiouser on the threshold of that odd little door, was that perhaps it didn't exist. There weren't any passers-by, so there was no way to subtly reorientate myself by the road markers of other people's behavior. But I did have my phone, and a cursory Google search confirmed that there was, indeed, a newly opened tattoo parlor in Soho called Alice in Inkland. Which at least meant that I wasn't slipping heedlessly into mania. I couldn't have explained why, but I went inside. At the top of the staircase was a tiny, red-painted room, the walls liberally plastered with posters, photographs, flyers, and glass-fronted frames containing what I presumed had to be tattoo art. There was a counter against the far wall, carved with the words "Then fill up the glasses with treacle and ink." There was also nobody there. Thank fuck. I turned to leave. "Can I help you?" I turned, like a thief caught in the act. From a door I hadn't noticed, a woman I presumed to be the owner had emerged. She was, frankly, enormous, with hair as red as a poinsettia plant. She was wearing a sleeveless top that showed the tattoos that swirled, bright and savage, up her arms and across her shoulders. I blinked, stammered, and gestured ineffectually with my hands. Right. See? This is why I don't do walk-ins. Same reason I won't shag you if you're drunk. Pardon? I'm not drunk. Not that I want to shag you. No offense. I'm just not into women. Pardon, I'm not something you regret in the morning. I'll be going. I indicated the door. But her voice called me back. What did you want? Anyway, Darian. World peace. Actually, fuck world peace. Darian. I think I wanted a tattoo. I got that much. From you walking into a tattoo parlor. Oh, right. She folded her arms. What did you have in mind? Oh, I felt heat surge to my cheeks. This was exactly why I didn't do impulsive. I sort of wanted a name. Her eyes made a lazily appraising journey from mine to my toes, and then back up again. That sounds like a story. It's not a story. It's an epilogue. I'm an artist, not a stonemason. She made an illustrative gesture in my direction. And that's a body, not a tombstone. All the same, again, art, not therapy. I arched a brow at her. Artist therapy. She was silent a moment. What's your name? EA Winners. What? The novelist too late now. Yes, I dig your books. I enjoyed a good mystery. But I don't know why you keep murdering everybody your detective likes. It's so I don't have to bother with character development. Are you going to do this, or not? She snorted like a particularly peeved minotaur. So you can laser me off when you have a change of heart. I don't think my heart is changing anytime soon. Just out of curiosity, I said at last, how do you make any money at this? For a tattoo artist, you seem pretty reluctant to do any tattooing. For a man claiming he wants a tattoo, you seem pretty reluctant to get a tattoo. Touché. But actually, I said, surprising myself, I'm not, and it was true. I nearly laughed. At least there would be something on my arms that was the consequence of a rational choice. If whatever I felt for Darian could in any way be described as rational. Have you given any thought to his style? A look? Placement? I honestly don't care. I was giddy with my own power. Just don't put it in a big red heart and we're good. She gave me a vicious glare, stomped round to her counter, pulled out a book, and slammed it down. Look at my portfolio, mister. Look at it. I looked. Do you see anything in there resembling a big red heart? No. I turned the pages. Her work was rather striking. Do you actually know anything about this at all? She asked suddenly. No. She flapped an impatient hand at me. Did the internet pass you by? Oh, wait, I know. You're a time traveler. You're dressed like one. Yes. I'm a time lord. Now, can I have a tattoo? You should research shit before you jump right in. I could be any sort of unsanitary incompetent. I suspect I closed her book and passed it back across the counter. If you were an unsanitary incompetent, you'd be gleefully branding me right now. There was a long silence. I stooped to base manipulation. Look, if you don't, I'll find an unsanitary incompetent. She stared at me through narrowed eyes. Okay. Come on through. I followed her into the second room. In contrast to the first, I felt like I'd turned up unexpectedly at the dentist. Everything was very neat and precisely laid out. In one corner there was a sink area and an autoclave, in the other a bench laid with inks and equipment. I took the big padded chair in the middle. It reminded me weirdly of getting ECT. "What's your name?" I heard myself ask. "I go by Alice. I suppose I should have guessed." When she was done at the sink, she came and sat down next to me. "Not your arse then." She lifted her brows wickedly. "Forearm will do. Thank you very much." I peeled off my jacket, rolled up my sleeve, and turned my hand palm up. "Want me to cover this up for you?" She tapped my scar. "In case of emergency, break skin. So I can look like someone who not only failed to kill himself, but then tried to hide failing to kill himself under a tattoo. It could have been a really hardcore cat for all I care." She shrugged, her fingers assessing my skin for the inadequate canvas it was. "Well, it wasn't. We talked a little about color, positioning, and size, and then she said, 'You still haven't told me the name.'" "Oh, right. Why was it so difficult to say aloud?" "Darian, and how are you spelling that?" "Don't want a beautiful tragedy going on, with 2 A's. Darian, what's he like?" she asked. "He made me happy." "Wow, I feel like I know the guy." "I can tell you're a writer." It was like seeing a word picture materialize before my very eyes. There was a pause. "Do you maybe want to try that again?" It took me a long time, but, on this occasion, she didn't press me. He's a kind, ridiculous, beautiful glitter pirate. I don't know what else I can tell you. He makes me laugh. He makes me hopeful." It was only after I'd spoken that I realized, present tense. "I can work with that. I'll freehand for a bit, and if you like it, we'll go from there." "All right." She picked up a pen, put it to my arm, and a ribbon of ink unfurled across my skin. "By the way," she said, "you didn't ask the question." "What question?" "The question everyone asks. Will it hurt?" "I don't care if it hurts." That night across the moon-pale scar that marred my forearm, Darian danced in dark ink, the gracefully curving edges of his name unraveling into a spill of color as joyful and haphazard as the promise of stars. Someday, walking with Amy to a signing, we passed a trendy clothing chain, the sort of place that sold about 12 different types of jeans, and there was Darian. He'd been poured into one of the 12 types of jeans and was tugging playfully at a long, multicolored scarf. Like most of his work, it was a careful piece of self-composition, but there was enough of my Darian, in the smile and in the eyes, that I had to look away. "I banged a model," I said. "Check me," but, somehow, the words didn't come out right and I just sounded sad. Some other day, I was sitting by the bar, reading 100% Essex, doing it the Essex way on my Kindle, for research, essentially on call for the latest of Niall's inevitably disastrous dates. He was over by the window and had already run his hand through his hair 3 times, which either meant he was flirting or it was the signal for help. Get me out of here. In retrospect, it had been a bad choice of signal. Next time I would suggest quacking like a duck if he wanted the date to end, which would send a clear message and come with the added benefit of not requiring my involvement. "See, can I maybe buy you a drink?" Without looking up, I quirked a finger in the direction of my Coke. "Full fat, not diet, with ice, and lime not lemon." "I've already got one." "Oh. Yes." A nervous laugh. I didn't really think that through. Relenting, I put down my Kindle. "It's quite a context-dependent line. What would you suggest?" asked the Adonis at my side. Dear God. Those eyes. That mouth. That body. Oh, that body. And he seemed to be talking to me. I waited for my libido to notice, but it lay there like a dead cat in a basket, and all the prodding in the world wouldn't rouse it. This was officially fucking ridiculous. And I couldn't keep staring at him, waiting for my cock to get with the program. "How about," I held out my sleeve, running a thumb lightly over the fabric. "What do you call this? A jacket? A sleeve? A really nice suit. Steady on, we're not playing charades with NT." The material? Oh, right. I'd say, he touched it delicately with a forefinger. Super 120 wool. I like a man who knows his fabric, but the correct answer was. There was a not quite awkward silence. Boyfriend material. I think you ruined my delivery, I said. Normally I'm beating them off with sticks after that one. I believe it, he replied, with just enough irony to almost make me smile. David, added the divine creature, holding out a hand for me to shake. When actually. Call me Ash. What do you do, Ash? I'm a writer. I supply terrible pickup lines to strange men in bars. And I'm a bipolar depressive. I'm a freelance web designer. And, I have OCD actually. What a relief we can't breed together. He gave a startled laugh. It's not so bad. It's not crippling or anything. Just really annoying for whoever I'm dating. I'm not looking for a relationship, David. Well, that was blunt. I winced. The man had barely said hello. But he was, if anything, even more embarrassed than I was. He slapped a hand over his mouth. Oh, shit. That sounded like I was coming on way too strong. He gave a lopsided smile, far too sheepish for a man who looked like a walking wet dream. One of his front teeth was slightly crooked. Before I'd met Darian, I would never have noticed. Bunny boiling comments aside, he said, I'm not necessarily looking for a relationship either. His eyes lingered on my mind, his smile curving suggestively. I rechecked my libido for signs of life. There was nothing. I thought about going with him anyway. But I didn't want to. Fuck. Did this mean I'd grown as a person? I'm probably going to regret this for the rest of my life, I said, because you are seriously the most gorgeous man who has ever failed to pull me. But I don't think I'm looking for that either. To his credit, he didn't drop me like a plastic carrier bag. Just out of something. I wasn't even in it. Oh, those are the worst kind. He slipped gracefully onto the bar stool next to me, moved the menu into alignment with the beer mats, and then hastily disarranged them again. I can't even bring myself to rebound, I said, pretending I hadn't noticed. I'm just sort of stuck. What happened? Bloody hell. I've turned into one of those wounded men who sit around in bars and whinge on about their broken hearts to hotties they should be fucking. It's fine. Really. I think one chat up per night, maybe per year, is about my limit, so I told him. Or, at least, I started. But then Niall flopped down onto the other free seat and interrupted by yelling at me. What the hell was that? Where was my rescue? He could have been psycho, was he? No, just another closeted stockbroker with submission fantasies. I thought you liked him. I shrugged. You usually flick your hair about when you fancy someone. I do not. He tried to lean casually past me so he could see David. Subtle. Niall, subtle. So, what were you two talking about? I tried to sound casual. Oh, nothing much. Nothing much. I know what that means. Can you please stop moping about Darian? I hung my head. I can't help it. I'm sorry. For God's sake, why don't you just apologize? Because I can't. Because then it'll be over. Niall pulled over my Coke and took a gulp. It's already over. You're not with him, are you? And look at it this way. If he feels about you even a little bit of the way you feel about him, he'll understand. And if he doesn't, you owe the poor bastard an apology anyway. Because you were a shitbag. What did you do? Asked David, wide-eyed. Before I could explain, Niall jumped in. You know that bit in the Bible when they're all like, Yo Peter, do you know this Jesus bloke? And he's like, hell, no. It was like that, but even worse. My word. Niall abandoned even a pretense of subtlety, put his elbows on the bar, and peered around me. David gave him a little wave, and Niall sat back with a stunned expression on his face. He ran a hand through his hair. Shut up, both of you. It was hard to look stern in two different directions, but I think I managed it. I make one slightly hyperbolic comparison and I never hear the end of it. By the way, Niall, David, Niall, payback time. David's a web designer. Niall works for a charitable trust. He particularly enjoys blondes and people with issues. So, I made a "you two should totally shag" gesture. And grinned as Niall went bright red. "I can't believe you said that," he muttered. "You are just the worst friend ever." David laughed. "We should probably get married. It'll make a great story to tell the grandkids." What? It was all going really well until my arse of a mate decided to throw me to the wolves, and that stole your heart away. "Come on," I protested. It was funny, but they weren't paying much attention to me. "So, what kind of charity do you work for?" "We're an independent educational equality think tank." "We could, do with a new website, actually." Niall fiddled with the straw in my Coke glass. "Perhaps you could come and, maybe, do some consulting for us. We could discuss it, over dinner." I felt almost sorry for him. He'd gone the ashen color of a man stuck in the middle of a dreadful line but unable to get out without finishing it. "I'd love to take a look at your website," perhaps David found ineptitude endearing. "And I'd love to go for dinner," Niall grinned sappily. "Then it's a date." "I thought you said it was a consultation." "It's a date." "For a consultation," he paused. "Oh, fuck it. Fine. It's a date. All right. Come on a date with me. Save me from myself. I clearly need help." Belatedly, Niall seemed to remember I still existed. We're going to get some food. Do you want to come?" Do I want to be the third wheel on your consultation date? Now let me think about it. No. I gave Niall's arm a quick squeeze. Anyway, I'm washing my hair. I left them to it. Night. Sleepless, staring at the ill-shapen lump of the Glardigan hanging from the top of my wardrobe door. Niall's words echoing incessantly in my mind. Darian's camera-caught smile burning behind my eyes. What was he doing? Did he ever think of me? Had he waited in Cambridge? Or longer than that? For the apology I was too ashamed to give. And then what? Had time and memory diminished me for him, taken the sting from my cruelty, the edge from my passion, until I was no longer a lover or a villain but some incidental character who had played a minor role in a life that told itself elsewhere? Was I nothing but the posh nutter who'd slept with him and then been pointlessly rude about it? If that was true, why would he not fade for me? Was this to be my punishment? He would move on, forget me, and be happy, and I would live like this, trapped within my wasted days, while the world cast at my feet the bright reflections of his image like shells from the receding tide. His still unframed photograph was propped on my bookshelf, as it had been from the day he'd given it to me. I had tried to throw it away and, when that had failed, to put it away. But there it was. Every day, I told myself it was better this way. I'd as good as saved him, and probably myself. Whatever we'd had, it had been a thing with no future, because I have no future, merely a dreary present that Derry and Taylor had briefly made brighter. I wondered if he suffered in my absence, as I suffered in his. It seemed impossible. When my own happiness was a mystery to me, what hope did I have of being instrumental in someone else's? I had tried to make Niall happy once, but all I'd done was nearly destroy us both. And even if I went to Darien, after all these months, bearing my too little too late apology like a cat with a dead sparrow, what else could I give him? Some pieces of truth. My stitched-together self. Once, he had thought he wanted me, and I had barely believed it then. Would he still? How could I ask him? How could I be enough? Then I remembered. Essex Fashion Week, my lies coming down around us like hail, and my gentle Darien claiming his right to be with me. Or, at least, the right to try. An unlikely champion, and Niall an unlikely dragon, but Darien had been the only one to ever take to the field for me. And when it had been my turn, I had simply fled like the coward I was. All I'd had to say was yes. Yes, he's my boyfriend. Was it too late, now, to pick up my tattered colors and ride out in my tarnished armor? It was easier, surely, to live uncertain, than with the shame and surety of rejection. But didn't I, too, have a right to try? I could tell him I had spoken out of selfishness and cowardice. I could tell him I was sorry. I could tell him he was the only thing in the world I wanted. I could cast myself at his feet, like the spoils of love and war, and ask nothing in return. And give him, at last, the choice I'd denied him in Cambridge, to have me, worthless as I was, or to reject me. It was what he deserved, and I would have to find the strength to bear the answer. Ignorance was a fool's shield. Living without knowing was almost as miserable as living without Darian. Tomorrow I would go Essex, and find the man who had not turned from the worst of me until I had cast him aside. I did not go to Essex. Tomorrow evening, I picked up my graduation photo, the one Darian had thought so unlike me. Looking into the unmoving, unblinking eyes of a boy with everything, and everything to lose, I realized I had become a stranger to myself. I had envied that boy, with all his hopes and dreams, his pride, his self-respect, and his glowing future. I had wanted to be him again and thought myself less than he was. Perhaps I am. But, though he was admirable and admired, nobody had ever looked at him with wide gray-green blue eyes and said he was Amazon. I could not be that scarless, fearless boy again. But, for a little while at least, I had been someone I could almost stand. Pieces of a better self, reflected in someone else's eyes. The photograph crashed against the wall, shards of glass strewing the floor in malicious, twinkling diamonds. Night, sleepless, of course, infinite scenarios scrolling behind my eyes like a cinema of self-destruction. The problem with admitting the value of anything was the pain that followed its loss. And I was still lying, the strata of my self-deception so deep and intricate, even I sometimes lacked the power to see through them. The truth then, stark in the bleak hours after midnight. It would have been noble to cast myself at Darian's feet and ask for nothing in return. But I wanted everything. Everything. Whether I deserved it or not. Once, I lived a life full of wanting and, like anyone else, I'd taken it for granted. But, in time, depression had flayed it from me, the wanting, the everyday hopes and dreams, and all the little desires. They became too dangerous to keep, too fragile to survive, and my bitter, barren soul could nurture no new ones. I'd kept only compromises, the shadows of old passions, things I just about learned to preserve. Today is a day in which I will not want to die. Today is a day in which I will want to get out of bed. My writing, my few remaining friends, the harsh, meaningless sex I sought with strangers, these were safe to want, and I knew they would not be taken from me. But a lover. I was so very afraid of Darian, the unsought miracle, and almost relieved to have driven him away. Yet the wanting remained, like the memory of his hands on my skin. I wanted Darian. With a pure, deep certainty, the first I had known for a very long time. Through the darkness, came the sharp, sudden quick stepping of my pulse. But it was not fear alone I felt. It was something else, too rare and insubstantial a thing to bear its naming. When I was young, the world had given me so much and everything had come so easily to me, that I'd hardly needed to try. And if I had ever struggled against my illness, if, that was, it had not already eroded me past the point of recognition, it was in a manner invisible even to myself. Through hospital days, my mother's voice, ringing sweetly, just try a little, darling, can't you try? I hadn't even fought to live. Paramedics had dragged me back from the threshold of death. But I would fight for Darian. Sacrifice be damned, selfish or not, hopeless or not, I would fight for Darian. I had no expectations of success, but I would try anyway, with all my meager strength. For Darian and for me, for my right to try, and his right to have me, and because I wanted him. I knew he would reject me and I knew it would hurt, but, even so, that nameless seed was still unfurling, unflinching and full-blossomed in the heart of some long-sealed garden. Chapter 21. Tomorrow, Oro. I stumbled around the back streets of Brentwood, heart-pounding, squinting at Google Maps, trying to find Chloe's boutique. This was such a bad idea. But then I found it. Bedazzled. It was, indeed, bedazzling. My eyes recoiled. I pushed open the pink painted door and stepped inside. More pink. Rack after rack of jewel-bright dresses. Gilded mirrors so ornate even the Victorians would have disdained them. Leopard print throw pillows arranged on a pink satin chaise longue. And Chloe, in a charcoal gray pencil dress and a set of killer heels, glaring at me. She did not, however, seem surprised to see me. She tipped up her chin like a woman preparing for battle. I think you've been totally AHT of order, bang out of order, I agreed. Her eyebrows V into a frown so tight it was like standing at the center of a sniper's crosshair. Are you being funny? 'Cause it ain't funny. It's AHT of order. I held up my hands in a gesture of abject surrender. I know. What's wrong with you? Why would you say something like that to him? Because I'm an arse. Yeah, she said fiercely. Yeah, you are. I thought you wasn't. But you was. I have so often claimed that I would rather risk hatred than endure pity, but it was only as I flinched from the fury in Chloe's eyes that I recognized yet another self-deception. Although I had earned it, her mistrust sat in me. There was no safety in being disliked. No solitary pride. Merely isolation, and the acknowledgement of everything selfishness and fear had wrought. Is he okay? 55-66 course he is, she snapped. Did you think I was going to let him sit there and crying after you mugged him off? It was she shook her head at the unfathomable awfulness of me so AHT of order, disrespecting Darian like that. My heart gave a strange little squeeze. His name rippled through my mind, stirring a rush of memories. The curve of his smile, the flattened vowels that once offended my ears, the stutter of his breath as he came, the constellations of freckles across his shoulders. He ain't been waiting for you or nothing, she said sternly. Is he with someone? I asked, unable to stop myself. There was an excruciatingly long silence. Chloe's hands clenched into fists. I really want to say yes. 'Cause it'd make you go away. But I ain't no liar, so no, he ain't. But don't go thinking it's 'cause he couldn't be. Or that it's anything to do with you. He's just been well busy with work. I really need to tell him I didn't mean what I said. My voice warbled tragically. I just want to Apple 99. You better not be sniffing Aaron trying to get back with him, interrupted Chloe mercilessly. 'Cause you proper blew it. I glanced up and my expression must have betrayed me. Oh my God, you are. What a nerve. I sat down on the edge of the chaise longue and put my head in my hands. I fucked up. But I know I want to be with him. More than anything. She did not look impressed. How many months did it take you to work that AHT? It was complicated. It wasn't complicated, honey. I'd never heard someone use an endearment as an insult before. I could hardly meet her eyes. Maybe it wasn't. I have no expectations that he'll forgive me, let alone want to try again, but I need to tell him. Her foot tapped an angry rhythm on the floor. Tell him how I feel. Thankfully, she let that one go, so I rushed on. And that I'm sorry and I didn't mean any of the things I said. Then why you say honey? A question I had asked myself repeatedly, obsessively, and still hadn't answered. Because I can't be trusted. We all say things we don't mean sometimes, I offered. Yes, we do, she agreed, nodding, and I had brief, ill-conceived hope that I might have won her round, but it's things like no, you look good as a brunette, and no, you haven't got a big bum. Not things like I'm only with him 'cause he's cheaper than a prostitute. 222. It was because I was scared. Okay, I pulled convulsively at my cuffs. Because it was easier to pretend I didn't care than admit I did. Chloe watched me squirm without much sympathy. I think that's pathetic. Well, pathetic. I don't care what Robbie Williams thinks about it, to be honest. I haven't asked him. I took a deep breath. Will you please tell me where I can find Marion? Or give me his number. Or something. Anything, if it was up to me, she said flatly. I wouldn't. Well, it is kind of up to you, I pointed out. Well, no, it ain't. It's up to Darian. 'Cause if you wanted to talk to him and I was like no way, 'cause you're a dickhead, it'd be like in that movie where Leonardo DiCaprio is all, you know. She held up her hands and looked sadly at the ceiling. doing quite a good impression of a frozen, dead Leonardo DiCaprio sinking slowly into the depths of the ocean. What? Titanic? Oh no, not that one. The other one. She thought about it for a moment. Where he's trying to get at touch of her with this girl, but she has to pretend to be dead or whatever, and there's a message what says I'm not really dead, just faking. But he don't get it and it's all bad. You mean? I asked carefully. Romeo and Juliet, yeah. And don't look at me like that, cause at school we done the one with the witches. But the point is, I think Darian shouldn't talk to you like ever again. But that's up to him, innit? That's a very enlightened attitude, yeah, it is. She nodded gravely. And if you hurt him again, I'll cut your bollocks off. My eyes fell on a pair of dress shears lying by the till. Right, he's probably at home with Nanny. Of course. He lives with his grandmother. I should have guessed, dear God. Of all the men in the world, why did I want this one above all others? A glottal-stopping glitter pirate who still lived with his grandmother. In Essex. A joke. It had to be a cosmic joke. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like the realest thing I'd known for a long time. The clearest and the simplest. As though everything else was white noise. Chloe scowled at me, and even through the Botox, it was ferocious. Well, where else is he supposed to live? I don't know. With friends? By himself, like a normal 23-year-old, then who'd look after Nanny? She had a fall. His parents, I shrugged. Her eyes burned like twin fires. He don't know who his dad is, and his mum left when he was 2. There was a silence so awful that a girl came in, presumably to buy one of the interchangeable, tiny dresses, took one look at us, and ran out again. Wedges clattering on the wooden floor. I didn't know. It ain't a secret. Honey, there was another grueling silence. Chloe's gaze was as unwavering as a spotlight. You really hate me, don't you? She considered it. I don't think I hate you. I just don't think you're a very nice person. And that ain't got nothing to do with being bipolar depressed. I know. And you're right. I think you really let down Stephen Fry. I did. Also probably Robbie Williams. Her eyes narrowed, like insincerity-seeking laser beams. I quickly changed tack. And I hurt Darian. I know. I'm not trying to make excuses, you better not. I'm not. I have no excuses. Just a world of shame. But what I was going to say was that, I paused, twisting my fingers painfully together, my nails catching at my skin. It's difficult, sometimes, for me to understand that I have the power to hurt someone. You see, it requires me to accept that somebody might like me in the first place. She blinked, the coal black fronts of her lashes drifting up and down like palm leaves stirred by a desert storm. I thought you was okay before you was a dick for no reason, she said gently. And Darian thinks you're some kind of super genius sex god, so you must be doing some in a white somewhere. He what? But she pressed on, refusing to indulge me with more enchanting stories about what Darian used to think of me. What are you saying all this to me for? Well, you still haven't told me his address. Suppose I have to. She picked up a pink, sparkly business card, turned it over, and scribbled on the back with a pink, fluffy pen. I escaped a few minutes later, Chloe's final warning tolling in my ears. You better not make me regret giving you that Glardigan, honey. Safely out of sight of the shop window, I leaned against a wall, gasping a little, clutching the card in a sweating hand. Now would be a really bad time to have a panic attack. Unlike all the really good times to have a panic attack, which were myriad. All I had to do was find Darian, try to make him understand why I'd done what I'd done, tell him I was sorry, listen to whatever he wanted to say to me, most likely fuck you, and leave again. And, somehow, in the middle of it all, find an opportunity to throw myself at his feet to prove that, in my hopeless, ramshackle way, I truly cared. That did not require the courage of Ajax. So, why was I about to collapse in the middle of Roper's yard? I slipped the card into my breast pocket to keep it safe and tried to steady my breathing. The truth was, Chloe had shamed me, not so much with harsh words, but by her actions. She'd given me Darian's contact details because she believed in his right to decide what he wanted. When had I ever done that? Even in Cambridge, I had put my pain above his and run away rather than face his anger or his hurt. I'd used him, and hidden myself from him, and finally betrayed him. Partially, yes, in the solipsism of depression, unable to see beyond my illness into a world in which other people were something more than hazy shadows cast across my sky. But mainly out of selfishness and fear. Ingrained habits of self-protection turned in upon themselves like septic toenails. The worst of it was, I was still doing it. If I truly wanted to be with Darian, it had to be his choice, as much as it was mine. I couldn't keep manipulating him and deceiving him and trying to present myself as better than I was. I had to stand in front of him, in all my ugly, twisted selfhood, and tell him I wanted him. And hope, against everything I believed possible, that he could want me back. That did require the courage of Ajax. And my heart was spinning like a Catherine wheel. I simply couldn't imagine him saying yes. It had taken far too long, but I was, at last, capable of recognizing that what I felt for Darian was real, not just a delusion born of madness or sex or loneliness or despair. He truly made me happy and, perhaps, I had the power to do the same for him. Not long ago, the idea that I could affect someone's life would have terrified me. Now I merely wanted to deserve that trust. Darian had treated me as though he'd had no fear of any pain I might cause him. Or, rather, that he believed I was worth it. And I had been too afraid, too lost, to see either his courage or his generosity. What had he said? Sadness is just a thing what happens. Well, now it was my turn to open my heart and let him reject me, if that was what he wanted. I could bear a little pain for him, surely. For someone who for a few shining moments, had helped me remember what it was like to feel human, happy, and hopeful. I closed my eyes. Breathe, Ash, breathe. And slowly, like watching toothpaste miraculously fold itself back into the tube, I pushed away the panic. Then I walked towards High Street and hailed a taxi. Chapter 22. 10 minutes later. I was staring at the stained glass insert of Darian's grandmother's front door, trying to find both my courage and the sticking place. I didn't know how long I stood there. I probably looked like a very nervous door-to-door salesman. Or like I was casing the joint. Finally, in a rush of frantic energy that was closer to desperation than bravery, I knocked. Darian opened the door within seconds. Oh white, babes. I could barely breathe. I'd grown so used to the dull ache of absence that seeing him again was an impossible entanglement of pleasure, pain, and desperate longing. I half imagined the letters of his name, inscribed on my skin and safely hidden under my suit, shimmering in recognition, like some magic spell, attuned only to him. I'd been imagining this moment for months. Well, something like this moment, for in my wildest fantasies it hadn't taken place in a pension or semi-detached in Brentwood. Through sleepless nights and distracted days, I'd as good as lived every possible scenario, from the one where we fell immediately into a passionate embrace, to the one where he chased me down the garden path with a carving knife. And none of them had Darian been wearing a Union Jack onesie. I had a vague memory of reading an article in The Independent about the sudden and inexplicable popularity of adult romper suits, but I'd never imagined I'd see someone actually wearing one. The Norwegians really did have a lot to answer for. I stared at him. You look like the British National Party's Easter Bunny. He cast a proud glance downwards. It's well safe, isn't it? Not the word I was reaching for. He smiled, a little uncertain, a little sad. And I realized I'd lost the right to be heedlessly insulting and watch him laugh it off because it would never have occurred to him to look for malice. I thought I knew self-loathing well enough that its barbs had long since lost their sting. But I was wrong. In my absurd visualizations, I'd always been so bound up in imagining Darian's reactions that I hadn't thought about my own. It hadn't even occurred to me I might just want to fall to pieces on his doorstep out of sheer sorrow and regret. I stood there helpless and speechless until Darian took pity on me. Didn't think I was ever gonna see you again. Didn't Chloe tell you I was coming? He pointed at his swoony quiff. This don't happen by magic, babes. My hair would have been a right state if she hadn't. Wait, you did your hair, but not the. I pointed at the fashion homicide he was casually perpetrating. These things take time, babes. And if the onesie's good enough for Cheryl Cole, it's good enough for me. Either Darian was so superlatively beautiful that even a Union Jack onesie couldn't blight him. Or I was so superlatively besotted that I found beauty even in his Union Jack onesie. Or, I really was insane. He took a slow, deliberate step back from the doorway, as if I were some kind of wild thing that would turn on him if he wasn't careful. "Do you want to come in or summon?" This had already all gone so very awry. There was something a little jarring about his calm when I felt as jangled as a bag of cymbals. Why was he inviting me inside as if I were an old friend paying a casual visit? Shouldn't he have been yelling at me? Slamming the door in my face? Do you mind? He shook his head. Nah. Nan's out. Gone shopping with the gals. He stood back to let me past. I was trying so hard to control my breathing, which had gone fast and shallow and terrified, that I somehow managed to trip over the very low, very obvious step. He caught my arm to steady me, warmth flowing from his hand. "You right?" "No." Not when his touch woke the memory of 1,000 other touches. His hands on my skin. His body under mine. My mouth on his cock. Not when all I suddenly wanted to do was to fall down with him, right there on the paisley-patterned carpet, and never let go. Yes, we went down the hallway into a chintzy, grandmotherish living room. Or, at least, what I'd always imagined a grandmotherish living room would look like. Cozy and cluttered, with overstuffed sofa cushions and unnecessary end tables everywhere. Knickknacks and souvenirs were littered across every available surface. The tacky memoirs of English seaside towns. A porcelain plate propped proudly on a little stand, showing a badly painted map of Ibiza. On the mantelpiece sat a flourishing spider plant overspilling from a misshapen clay pot, clearly made by a child's loving hands and daubed with the legend "World. Sick. Best Nan." I tried to remember if I had ever presented something like that to my parents. Surely I must have. My mother would sometimes put my report cards on the fridge if I got enough as. Tucked into the frame of the mirror over the fireplace were cards celebrating long-gone but still cherished occasions, and it was impossible to construct the wallpaper's pattern behind the pictures and photographs that covered it. It was like watching lifetimes pass before your eyes. There was Nanny Dot on her wedding day, hand in hand with a handsome young man in a soldier's uniform. There was a teenage Chloe, sunbathing in an extremely small bikini, looking like Humbert's dream come true. And Darian, of course. From smiling, pudgy childhood to a visibly unhappy adolescence to his grinning, glittering self. I understood occasion photographs. There was a family photograph in our hallway. My mother brought us all together for a new one every 5 years. And I knew a framed copy of my graduation photo was hanging in one of the drawing rooms next to the one of my father shaking hands with Margaret Thatcher. But these were photographs of nothing. A toddling Darian and a toddling Chloe standing, with slightly shocked expressions, in the snow. A tiny baby Darian cradled in Nanny Dot's arms. Darian in his school uniform, eating toast. Darian and Nanny Dot at the beach. Darian and Nanny Dot in the garden. Darian and Chloe, dressed to kill, sharing a bottle of champagne in the kitchen. Birthday after birthday after birthday. Christmas after Christmas after Christmas. I was fascinated. So many meaningless moments. So treasured. On one wall, surrounded by the smiles of other people, was a dark-haired woman with secrets in her eyes, her abstracted gaze seeking something only she could see beyond the frame of the photograph. "Is that your mother?" I asked. "Yeah. She left when I was little. I don't remember like anything about her. I'm sorry. Sorry for not listening. Sorry for not caring. Sorry for being too afraid to care. Sorry for being selfish. Sorry for being cruel. Sorry for being me. Sorry for not being 1/10 of the man you thought I was." He shrugged. "Just one of them things. Did you ever think of looking for her? Course. What happened?" He gave a strange sort of laugh. "Nothing happened, babes. Life don't work like a storybook with a proper ending. You couldn't find her, didn't look. We haven't gone anywhere. She knows how to find us. I reckon if she wanted to be air, she'd be air. I didn't know what to say to him. Well, I tried. Maybe she couldn't. For whatever reason, as comfort or platitude, it might have been more effective if I'd actually been able to come up with a reason. But he nodded. That's what I like to think. It's better than thinking she just doesn't want me. Do you know what I mean? I thought I'd long ago lost both the capacity and the desire to deal with the everyday pain of other people. There was nothing I could do that would make it better for him, but I wanted to stand at his side and let the world come, with all its minor setbacks and arbitrary cruelties. Maybe, in my frailty, I would flinch. Maybe my strength would buckle, but maybe it didn't matter as long as I was there. And maybe it was all too late. I can't imagine anyone not wanting you, Darian. His eyes met mine, clear as the sky, and he gave me a bitter little smile. Course you can, babes. But before I could protest, he added, I'll want anything. Like some tea or whatever. No. Thank you. We stood in the middle of the living room, suddenly looking at everything but each other. Do you want to sit down or something? I need to talk to you about what happened. I blurted out, finally managing to meet his eyes. I need you to know I didn't mean any of the things I said, and I'm so sorry I said them. Darian's gaze skittered away. Babes, that's a white. I mean, it was well harsh. But it's a white. Chloe had been right. He was over me and had been for a long time. I tried to think of something to say, stuttered into helpless silence, and, this time, Darian did not help me. Locked outside his eyes, held at bay by his politeness, it felt like a cold and vast eternity. I tugged at my cuffs, mustering what remained of my dignity. Oh, well, it's just, I wanted to. It was also completely hopeless. I was beached by his indifference. I had expected it. It was a fitting conclusion. But, God, it hurt. The true, pure sting of loss, untainted by depression, madness, or denial. It's not even remotely all right. I swallowed what felt like a sodden lump of words and tears. You don't have to be nice to me about it. Well, my nan always says it don't cost nothing 66 to be polite. I finished. Yeah, aren't you angry with me? You should be. Oh, I was, babes. I had the like you wouldn't believe. But it don't matter now. He fiddled absently with the zip on his onesie. And that was then I realized, he was lying to me. Something else I had apparently taught him. Darian, I tried to catch his eye, but he wouldn't turn his head, and I knew it for the rejection it was. Darian, please. I know I behaved unforgivably, but you have to believe me when it wasn't a big deal. Finally he turned. His mouth was tight, and in the depths of his eyes, like a wisp of cloud, there was a piece of fresh pain I had put there. Not till you made it one. I mean, I was well narked at first, but then I had to think about it, and I knew you didn't mean nothing. My mouth dropped open. Something brash and joyous filled my heart like fireworks. You knew. I'm not a total numpty. I could see what was going on. I only came over 'cause there was being a bunch of bellends, and you looked like you was in a right state. Yes, but I still shouldn't have said what I said. I hate myself for it. Forget it. His voice had been brittle with assumed lightness, but now it turned sharp. If you want to feel bad 'cause you dumped me in Cambridge without even saying thank you. Have a nice life. Darian scuffed his toe into the carpet. I waited all night, he whispered, but you never came. My breath caught. I felt, suddenly, a little sick. What? It don't matter. Oh God. Of course he'd waited. Darian was the kindest person I'd ever met. Even after everything that had happened, he would still have given me the benefit of the doubt, which is more than I'd ever done for him. How had I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, running from him all across Cambridge, as though he were some monster of my own devising? I'd had my reasons, but it was like looking over my shoulder at depression, and irrational strangers' choices, driven only by the most incomprehensible shadows of the self. I reached for what seemed the simplest explanation. I should have come after you, but I was too ashamed. Darian only shrugged. So I knew I'd had it right the first time round, and that everything you'd said was true. I stared at him in dismay. It was too easy to imagine him waiting for me, the slender figure on the banks of the Cam, his shoes glinting like bits of star. And then what? A train back to Brentwood in the early hours of the morning, the words he hadn't at first believed seeping into his heart like poison, tainting all the memories I'd clutched like precious things through these long, empty months. I'd ruined everything. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, and burst into tears. It was messy and mortifying, and I'd had no idea I was still capable of it. Pressing both hands to my mouth in a futile effort to stifle my sobs, I spun away from him. But the more I tried to compose myself, the less I succeeded, and the worse it all became. Oh God! Oh God! I'm so sorry, it came out a damp and hopeless garble. My life had been little more than a parade of indignities. Mania. Institutionalization. Drugs. ECT. Depression so deep they have flayed my humanity to shreds and patches. The times I'd wanted to die. The times I'd tried. The doctor who sewed up my arms without anesthetic to impress upon me the stupidity of what I had tried to do. Yet they all paled to this, weeping my wretched heart out in front of a man who no longer wanted me. Then Darian came up behind me and wrapped his arms tightly around my shaking body. It was familiar and perfect and unbearable, because I knew he would never do it again. For my sanity's sake, I should have pulled away, but I didn't. I leaned back against him, like a masochist onto a blade. I took a deep, shuddering breath. You don't have to, babes. I ain't gonna stand there like a lemon and watch you cry, I think. My voice wavered. I'm done now. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. But Darian held me through it. And told me everything was white, even though nothing was. Finally, we were just holding each other, and I had no idea what it meant, or what was going to happen next. Very gently, Darian drew away. I clutched for him, but he shook his head. We faced each other again, across a distance that suddenly felt more like miles. Darian's eyes had that haunted look I'd seen earlier. Listen, I know you feel proper bad about what happened. But you don't have to, cause it's, like, happened. And it was nice you coming round to say sorry, even though it took you like forever, cause you didn't have to do that either. He took a deep breath. But I think maybe you should go now. Oh God. Oh fuck. Oh no. I'd known he wouldn't want anything to do with me. I'd known. And yet, somehow I'd come here anyway, led astray by a treacherous will-o'-the-wisp that had felt like hope. My heart did something private and melodramatic that I thought might be breaking. But I haven't explained, I pleaded, as though I had any right to keep talking to him when he'd already told me he wanted me gone. Or told you how much you mean to me. Darian had gone back to refusing to look at me. Mate, I don't think I care. You don't know what it's like for me, having you here, knowing exactly what you think of me. 99 The words tumbled out, immediate and desperate. You've got it wrong. I don't think like that. Please let me, Ash. God. My name sounded so strange on his lips. I would have spun my soul into gold to hear him call me babes again. I don't want you here. Don't you get it? You're doing my head in, cause I know you think I'm an idiot. And I think you might be right, cause I still care about you even after what you done. I still care about you was all I needed to get me across the room, as though my feet had sprouted wings. But Darian shied back like a startled colt, and I pulled up short. Touching him was something else I could no longer take for granted. I tried to explain instead, terrified it would not be enough. I know I've treated you badly, and I know I have no right to ask anything more of you, but I'm here because I still care as well. Still care. He blinked. Mate, if you cared the first time errand, you got a funny way of showing it. Jannar would mean, I know. But if you'll let me, I'd like to show you now. He gasped. This is my Nanzus. God. No, not like that. I meant, you know, with words. Oh right. Sorry. It's just the one thing I knew was really proper, and I winced. I was into all of it? Yes. I loved fuck. He gave me a stern look. Having sex with you. But you cooked for me. And you talked to me. And you held me? And you made me feel everything was going to be alright, somehow, even when I was most afraid it wasn't. His head drooped. I dunno. Maybe. I dunno. Thing is, I don't think you ever liked me the way I liked you. I opened my mouth to speak, but he held up his hand, and I fell silent. I should have known right from the start something was off. What with someone like you liking someone like me? He chewed his lip. 'Cause I know I'm like, what's the word? Like what olives are like. Acquired taste. 'Cause I'm sort of a bit orange, and I think I'm sometimes probably a bit shallow, and I spend like literally all of my money on gloves. But with you, it was like, if this clever, sexy bloke can see someone in me worth having, then maybe I'm a white. Darian, you're more than alright. I looked up wildly. Amazon, but, he finished, ignoring me, all you ever saw was a bargain basement bang. He was so right and so wrong. I'd certainly treated him like one. No. I mean, at first. But, Darian, only at first. And maybe not even then. In Brighton, you were just supposed to be a stranger, but I kept seeing you, and then I wanted you. Not the stranger. He smiled then, but it was not a happy smile. And I missed his glittering pirate grin with an intensity that made my eyes burn with fresh tears. Brighton, I'd never met anyone like you. You was like so sad, I just wanted to make you smile. I reached out in desperation and took his hand. He didn't resist, but he didn't participate either. My fingers curled around his, begging for a response. I've never met anyone like you either. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Darian, please. I don't know how many times I can tell you. 22. Well, he cut in sharply. I dunno if you noticed. But I'm a bit thick, so you might have to say stuff slow and use small words. What had I done? If I hadn't been clinging to Darian, I might have slumped to the floor with the sheer misery of it all. I don't think you're stupid. I know I've made you think I do. But I don't. I never did. And you're breaking my fucking heart. I dashed fresh moisture from my eyes with the heel of my spare hand. Will you stop it? Suddenly his fingers tightened around mine. Babes. I'm sorry. Don't cry. I'm not crying. I wept. I'm just frustrated. I keep trying to tell you, but you won't listen, and you won't believe me, he sighed. I know I said I wasn't, but I'm a bit narked. Okay. I can't help it. And, confused as well. His thumb moved absently over the back of my hand, as though he couldn't help but try to soothe me. 'Cause it's been months. And you show up there out of nowhere, with no warning, no nothing, to tell me. I still don't know what. That I've spent all this time getting over you for no reason, 'cause it was all a big mistake. I crept forward another step, my body aligning to his, not quite touching but on a technicality only. I know what I said at the wedding, and I know I treated you like you didn't matter. I swallowed, struggling with my truths, and staring instead at our entangled hands. Yet Darian's voice was as gentle as the brush of his thumb against my skin. It wasn't that I didn't care. I bent my head and swiftly kissed the muddle of fingers, half expecting Darian would pull away, but he didn't. I cared too much. My courage, usually the most faltering and unreliable of flames, flickered into sudden life, and I looked up. It was as though Darian had been waiting for me, his eyes so steady on mine and as infinitely blue as the promise of high windows. I was terrified, because of how happy you made me, and how much you made me feel. He nodded slowly. Wish you'd just come after me, babes. So do I? Then why? Darian's voice rose. The fuck didn't you? Shock flashed across his face, most likely mirrored on my own, because it was the only time I had ever heard him swear. Then he pulled himself out of my grasp and reeled away. I was right there, he finished, not looking at me. And then I was right here. He took a few loud, slightly unsteady breaths. How heedlessly and how deeply I had hurt him, too preoccupied, as ever, with my own pain and uncertainties. I wanted to go after him again, as if holding him physically could somehow bridge these other chasms. But I had already spent too long thinking only about what I wanted. I looked after him helplessly. "I'm sorry I hurt you." He turned back slowly and then shrugged. "You really did. You know." "I know." I twisted my bereft fingers together. "I just wanted you so much that I thought I didn't deserve to have you. I'm not a Scooby snack, mate." He frowned at me. "It ain't up to you whether you get to have me or not. I know. It was fucked up and unfair." I tapped the side of my head. "Kind of mental, remember? But I know that doesn't make it any better." I met his gaze and tried not to flinch. "But now it's up to you, Darian." "What is?" Could I bear the rejection? Probably not, but I had come this far. For him. I could do this for him. One right thing. Let me do one right thing. He held me in the blue-gray horizon of his eyes, and I wasn't sure if I was drowning or flying, if I jumped or if I fell. "Whether you forgive. And, oh God, whether you get to have me, oh God, or not." His expression barely changed, but there it was. Finally, some curve of his lip or the brightness in his eyes, like the gleam of light at the heart of a pearl. My Darian, my glitter pirate. The man I wanted. The man who wanted me. I rushed on. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I have no right to ask, but I just thought if I came in, stood in front of you, and explained, and tried not to fuck it all up too badly, you'd see that I really like you. I've always really liked you, even when I've been awful, and, really, I'm just standing in front of you, asking you to, shitting hell, where the fuck had that come from? Even if I were the sort of man to make those sort of declarations, I'd like to hope I'd at least use my own words and not those of a cheesy rom-com from the late 90s. But Darian's face lit up like Christmas. AWW, I love that film. He gazed at me expectantly. "Go on. Then, what?" "I've sort of finished, babes." "You haven't finished, and I've been waiting for this all my life." I coughed. "You've been waiting all your life for a bipolar depressive to completely fuck up his relationship with you, and then take the best part of half a year to tell you he's sorry." I could have done without that bit. Thanks. "But I do want to know I wasn't just being stupid all that time for thinking you was into me." Oh God. I finally understood what he wanted. He wanted to actually hear the words. And, until he did, all my apologies and explanations weren't worth a damn to him. It was an absurd situation, as usual, but I shouldn't have been surprised to find myself in it. Pirates only really belonged in fairy tales anyway. "Darian," I said. Roland Barthes argued that a phrase as commonly used as the one I think we're discussing is essentially a meaningless signifier. He blinked. "Right. A linguistic feint, a formula stripped of ritual, neither a thing uttered nor an utterance itself. In short, as a statement, it's without value, and as a promise, it's without depth, babes. Yes, I know you really like this barf's cheese, but I'm telling you, as like a favor from me to you, this really ain't the time. But it don't have to be forever or nothing. It just has to be like possible. You know what I mean?" I twisted my fingers together, my nails pressing rictus grins into my flesh. "Why? Why does it even matter?" Darian stepped back across the space between us. He reached out and gently caught up my hands, holding them between us as though in prayer. I certainly felt enough like a supplicant. His palms glided across my skin until they pushed back my cuffs and encircled my wrists, my twin scars. There was no reason why it should have, but it calmed me, like the weight of his body covering mine. Mindless, I made a soft noise into the silence, and I heard Darian's breath catch in his throat. Somehow, all the distance was gone, our bodies pressing together on either side of my trapped hands. 'Cause it does. It matters to me. If you really think you feel something like that for me, even after everything what's happened, then I want to hear it. Fine. I tried to sound grudging, but it was impossible. Darian believed me. He was close to me. He was touching me. But only if you mean it. I closed my eyes, thinking of nothing but the warmth of his hands. The glitter on his nails danced in my darkness like dust motes. "How can I know if I mean it?" 'Cause you'll know, I do know, I whispered, that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I opened my eyes again and there was Darian, waiting for me, through my evasions and hesitations. Just as he'd waited one long night in Cambridge. Except, this time, I would not fail him. I would deserve him, somehow. Whatever you decide, I need you to know that. He nodded. Oh, white, his hands were so warm. I never wanted him to take them away, but there was nothing I could do to hold him there, except hope and trust he would stay. And I need you to know that if you send me away, I'll go, and I'll be fine. I'll be sad, but I'll be fine. I'll live and I'll write and I'll miss you and think about you, and, truthfully, I'll probably wank over you, and I'll be depressed sometimes and mad sometimes, but you won't have to worry because I'll be fine. I never used to believe it, but I know it now. He dipped his head to kiss my trembling fingers, and the scent of his hair gel rushed over me, so familiar I might have cried had I not done enough of it today to last me the rest of my life. I know you will, babes, but I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to be with you, if you still want to be with me. If you can still find something worth wanting. I fought to sound normal, but my every breath felt like a shudder. I could have stopped there, perhaps I should have, but I promised him everything. Even the ugliness. Even the truth. Darian, I'm still mentally ill. I'll always be mentally ill. I have bad days and good days and very, very bad days. Maybe you won't be able to handle it. He silenced me with the lightest of kisses. That's up to me, babes. I shuddered on the sweetness of it, yet still afraid. Okay, we can figure it AHT. Okay. His thumbs were tucked against my palms and I wrapped my fingers over them, squeezing tightly, knowing at last how to say what I had to say. I'm not here because I'm broken. I'm here because I'm whole. Difficult, potentially undeserving, but whole. And I don't need you, I just want you. I want you. My voice had gone embarrassingly husky so fucking much. And, another breath, comma, maybe I love you. Or could love you. Or might love you. Or may come to love you. There was a dizzy rushing in my brain, as though I was about to faint or have a nosebleed. Or whatever. Babes. Darian was grinning at me. You're totes romantic. I stared at him, stunned and horrified. Oh God, it's true. I do. I actually love you. I really do, I laughed. Not entirely without hysteria. I love you. Yeah, Darian nodded sagely. I thought you did. Then I thought you didn't. Then I thought you really didn't. Then I thought you did again. It's all good, babes. I leaned into him, because maybe I could do that now. It was awkward because he still had my hands, but I didn't care. He could keep them, forever if he wanted, as long as we could stay like this. Foolish thoughts, because everything changes, always, even, apparently, me. Is it? I asked, suddenly too exhausted by tears and truths, too much emotion and frightening four-letter words to quite believe it might be. Is it really all good? Yeah. You know I think you're Amazon. I'm sorry I'm such an utter wanker. AUDIOBOOK, babes. You're not really. You just pretend you are for some reason. I don't know why. 'Cause you're a bit weird sometimes, I think. I nodded. That was a fair assessment of my character. And more generous than anything I would have said, or thought. His hand slackened on my wrists and I looked up to see he was frowning again. I groaned. Oh fuck, what do you want now? The moon on a stick. He still didn't smile, and fresh anxiety slipped down my spine like a silver blade. Do you mean it, babes? About wanting to be with me. About maybe possibly maybe being in love with me? Everything you said before, Cher. Giddy relief expressed itself in exasperation. Of course I fucking meant it. Do you think I just carved my heart into pieces for shits and giggles? Calmed on. Now he grinned, that beautiful, generous, absurdly glittering grin. I was just checking. 'Cause, you know, even though it's a totally meaningless linguistic fart, faint. Yeah, that. I thought you might maybe want to know. That's not necessary. I might feel like being in love with you too one day. You know, if you ever learn how to use a cheese grater properly, no deal. But it was no use. The idea had taken root like a weed. Darian Taylor might one day feel like being in love with me. Like everything else in my life, it was nothing I would ever have thought I wanted, but I would learn to cherish it. Maybe the day would come that depression would take him away from me one way or another, but for now, it was enough. More than enough. More than I could have dreamed possible. Darian was looking serious again. So, let me get this right. We're gonna make a go of it. You and me? Todger. Even though I'm orange and you're mental, yes, I said. Yes, please, and I, once again, threw myself enthusiastically into the embrace of a man in a Union Jack onesie. Darian's arms enfolded me, sweeping me into his warmth, and I pressed my face into the safe darkness of his shoulder. I can't promise it'll be simple. I can't promise there's any future in it, and I certainly can't promise I'll watch Strictly Come Dancing with you. He gave a horrified gasp. But I will try. I know I don't deserve it, but please let me try. Yeah, I heard the familiar smile in his voice. White. Chapter 23. Now. He catches my face between his hands, his painted fingernails twinkling like stars, and when he kisses me it feels a bit like fear and tastes a bit like tears, but it's as bright and sweet as sherbet, and I decide to call it joy. Dear reader, thank you to listen to a book Alexis Hall's Glittlerland. We know your time is precious and you have many entertainment options, so it means a lot that you've chosen to spend your time listening. We really hope you enjoyed it.